Now that we have our data cleaned and set up, we've written the tool to do that. We don't need to run that again. It's time to start working in React. So I'm going to close the utils directory I had open here, and I'm going to open source, and we're just going to go inside app.js here. And instead of deleting all this like the other tutorial did, we'll just alter this to work for what we need to change. So before we get started with that, let's open a new terminal. Actually, I can see I've got a few open. I'm going to trash can a couple of these. We'll just go back to the first terminal I have here. And so I am inside my vehicle picker directory. You see that with the pwd command. I can do an ls. I am next to package.json, and I can run npm start. Now understand what this command is doing. Npm start, npm, looking inside package.json for a script called start. If we just take a peek in package.json really quick, we can see there's a scripts key that's an object, and there's one called start, and it executes this command. So if you have a problem running npm start, make sure you are in the directory, the same directory that your npm package file is that you got from create react app. Great. So now create react app is running. We can see this in our browser. It tells us we can edit source.app.js and save to reload. So we will do just that. Make sure everything is working as expected. So we'll open app.js. We will leave the image up there. We will get rid of the paragraph tag and the anchor tag. And we will just say, hello world, and hit save. And so it should have reloaded. We can go back to our browser and we can see that it's got the little React animation and it says hello world. So that's perfect. We're in a great spot to get started. Let's leave the class name, style sheets, let's leave all that the same. We'll get rid of the image, get rid of the header. And what we want to drop in here, just to start stubbing our application, I'm just going to put in another div. And I'm going to do 3 select boxes. And so I'm just going to copy and paste this 3 times. And they're all, I closed it around, self-closing tags. So there's 3 select tags there. And logos defined, not used. Let's just kill that. And then we can save it, make our linter happier. And we can come over here and look. And so now we have these 3 select boxes. Now they don't do anything. And that's where we've got to do our work. So select boxes use options. So I'm getting rid of that self-closing tag, and I'm going to put an option inside of here. And so we will just say hello, and let's copy and paste this 3 times. So select option, hello, hello, hello. We'll say hello, world, exclamation point. Hit save. And so now we can see the content of each select box is set by those option tags. Hello, world, and an exclamation point. So we're going to populate this with years, makes, and models. And we're going to dynamically change those as we click through them. Before we do that, I'm going to go ahead and open my inspector. So that's Control-Shift-I on Windows. What is that? Command-Alt-I, I believe, on Mac. And so I've got my console open. It says we can install the React developer tools. I'm going to go ahead and do that. So if you've not done that, you can grab that from the Chrome Web Store for Chrome. We can hit add to Chrome. I don't know that we're going to need it for this project, but it helps. So we've got that set up. Let's refresh the page, and we get that message disappears. So it's detected that we have the dev tools installed, and we can see that up here with React developer tools. And it tells us it has access to the site. So let's close this. I'm going to refresh the page. Control-Alt-I, or I'm sorry, on Windows Control-Shift-I. There we go. And we reload that. Now we have this React tab over here. That helps us explore our application and what we're building there. So I'm going to focus back on console. Let's jump back over here in app.js. So we have our component that we've defined this render method on. But this needs some data loaded. And so there were some life cycle functions that you can use when loading data. And so one of those is called component, and you can see this helping us out. Component did mount. And so once this component is mounted, we want to fetch some data, and we will use the fetch API to do that. And actually, I'm going to comment this out for just a second and hit save. Remember, the file that we already created is under public by year.json. So I'm just going to show you what that URL looks like in the browser. If we come back over here and we type in /by year.json, the data loads at that URL. So we're going to use that to load our data. So, and maybe we'll be a little bit more descriptive. We will say our year make model equals, not equals, that's just empty lines. We'll say let year make model, and then we will call fetch, and the URL that we are fetching is /by year.json. And just like we've done with our other fetches, there is a .then, and we handle the response that the fetch returns by calling response.json, which returns a promise. So then when the JSON data promise is resolved, we can console.log JSON. Or a better thing to do in our case is we'll just say year make model equals JSON. And I think I've put this in the wrong spot. So we'll let that hang out for just a second and fix this. So we have to make a constructor for this. It takes props as an argument, and that gives us the ability to call super and pass in the props. And then we have access to this. So we have access to this class. And so we can say this dot state equals this object, and we can say year make model is an empty object. So we've kind of initialized our state for our component here. And so we'll get rid of this let, and we'll set the state down here. So once the JSON has returned, we will come in here and say this dot set state year make model the JSON data, and hit save. And now we can go over and look at our application. We can go into the React tab, and we can see the state here for our application, our app component, year make model, and we can see that we have data, the keys here by year, 1909, Ford Model T, and the ID for that is 1. We can jump down here. We can look at 2006 Chrysler and the various models they had in 2006, Chrysler 300, Crossfire, Roadster, so on and so forth. So now that this is loaded, we have the ability to wire our state up to our select box. So our first goal here is just, let's make this first select box present options for all the years. So component did mount. We have this information in here. The state gets set and updated. So I'm just going to make a little helper method here called get year options. And so when I call get year options, I want to return a list of option tags, right? So I'm just kind of stubbing this code out as I think about it. I want to return a list of option tags based off of the data that we have in our current state. And so year make model is an object, so that's important to keep in mind. So year make model, let's return this dot state dot year make model. And I don't want to just use that object in and of itself. I want to say object dot keys, because the keys, the top level keys of this object, are the years. And so we can see that again if we look in the browser. Year make model has a bunch of keys, and they are all years. And so at this point, return object dot keys this dot state year make model. And then that's just going to give us all of the years. That doesn't help us get our list of option tags. So we're writing JSX. And so if you remember when we've talked about this, you can use for each, but you can also use map. And the difference between those is map returns something. It makes a new list automatically. So when we're going to loop over those keys, we're going to call map instead of for each. And we're going to pass in a function, and it's going to take k, and it's going to take an arrow function, and this is important. There's no curly braces, right? These are parentheses, and I want to return an option, and I want the option to be the key, right? So I'll hit save on that. It still rolled it up to one line. I was trying to split it out to make it a little more readable, but we're saying for all of the keys in the year, make, model object, which we instantiate as an empty object, so that's a valid thing. It'll just be an empty array when it initializes. We want to map over each of those keys, and we want to return an option for those keys. So option with K in here, and caught my typo right there. K goes in curly braces because that's JavaScript. So we're jumping out of JSX back into JavaScript to say K. So we'll save this file, and we will go back over to our browser. Nothing changed here yet. So we've got to plug in all those options here in place of hello. So instead of having an option for hello, we're going to put in our little curly braces to jump back into JavaScript, and we're going to say this dot get year options. So we'll just call that function. What's my linter complaining about? Exceeds the maximum line length. So that's easy to fix, but it's funny because it rolled that up, but we can put line breaks in there, so hopefully it'll stick. Now that's interesting. There's a line length settings that we can set in the linter, and I think ESLint is out of sync here, and it could be also that I'm using prettier. Let me disable that for the workspace and reload and see if that helps get rid of that problem. And so we're going to map over those values on a separate line. Yeah, so that got rid of that problem. I was just using a tool called Prettier to help format my code, and the line length settings are out of sync with ESLint. So no big deal. So I've saved that. I reload the page. So let's reload while we're looking at it. So page is reloaded. Oh, did it crash? Oh, it crashed because it reloaded. I apologize. PWD, what directory are we in? Notice we are not in our React application directory. I'm going to cd into vehicle picker. Again, my window reloaded because I disabled Prettier. So we'll hit clear, ls. So we're in here with our node modules and our package.json, and so we can fire off npm start. So I'm just going to close these other extra tabs that were open, and we will wait for our application to load. And now we can see that we have all of the years in here, 1909 through 2013, and I can click on those and change the year. We can open our developer tools back up, Control-Shift-I. We can go to the React tab, connects to React. We can come in here, see what we've selected. Right now you can see the state, nothing's been selected here. We're not keeping track of the fact that we've chosen 1948. So that's the next thing we want to tackle is when I choose a year, I want to note in the state what year I've chosen. So first thing, I always want to add to my state. We'll say year selected. And we'll say year selected. We'll set that to an empty string. So we're initializing this to a default value, empty string. We'll save it. We can jump back over, and now we can see year, make, model, and year selected. We have to put an event handler on our select in order to hook into that. So here we will say on change equals curly brackets this dot handle year select dot bind this. A lot of ways to write that. We just do the dot bind this. So we're binding the scope here to that function call. And so now we need to stub in that function, so I can just copy the name of it. I called it handle year select. And so handle year select will get past an event, right? So this is an event handler, and it will get past an event, and we will stub this out with a console.log year selection changed, and we'll log out the event as well. So now we can go back over to Chrome, and we'll open console, and we'll go down in 1962, year selection changed. 1968, year selection changed. Notice we have access to this. It says synthetic event. So these events get passed. They have several properties in the events. We can't see what target was. When you try to click on it, it'll say null. We should be able to see, and when we close that, it says the synthetic events reused for performance reasons. What we're looking at inside that event, the target, is what the event was fired on. So let's just look at evt.target, and we should find that it's an instance of the select box itself here. So your selection has changed, and target is the select box. And so targets, for what we're selected, we should now have access to a value. So any of your form elements should have a value. So evt.target.value is what we want to log out. So we will refresh the page, and we will select 1961, and we can see year selection changed to 1961. So at that point, I want to hang on to that in the state. So this dot set state, and we pass in just the properties we want to change. So again, we called that year selected. So this dot set state, notice I have curly braces. This is the object. We're updating this object. Year selected gets changed to event target value. So we can hit save, come back over here, click in here, look in our React Dev Tools, and now year selected is tracking which year we have picked from our select box. Now, most selects, again, let's pull back up, let's reference what we're building, AutoZone.com. And so in AutoZone, this add a vehicle right here, they're saying choose a new vehicle year, make, model, engine. So to give it the same sort of functionality, these are locked. We have this default value that sits at the top of the list. We're going to plug that in. So year selection changed. We can get rid of this console, clean this up, and let's fix these options. And so select on change. We bind that. We call the function get year options. I'm just formatting my code a little bit here. This option is going to be the make. The last one is going to be model. And so we can just put an option right here on top of this. So option, and so this will be year. And so we can save that. And we'll come back into React App, and now we can see it says year, make, model. Notice these are not disabled. They just say make and model. So we'll come back to that, tackle how we keep those disabled. But for now, let's work on our year selection here. We also have an error in the console. Each child in the list should have a unique key property. Let's fix that really quick. So our get year options, it just needs a key property. So we just say option key equals, and we can use the year that we're on as the key. We also can go ahead and set the value equal to the key as well. So value is important. I glossed over it. We didn't talk about it yet. So option year, let's set the value here equal to an empty string. So no selection is an empty string, which matches our default value for year selected. So this automatically refreshed for us. We see year, make, and model. Let's look in React, year selected. Console, notice that error's gone. So back in the React tab, year selected. We jump down, we pick it, it updates. That looks good. So we want to disable these other two selections. So I want make and model. I want these to be disabled. So we say disabled. I want disabled set. curly braces so we can do some JavaScript here. I want it disabled if there is not a value in this .state .year selected. If you have not selected a year, you cannot select the maker model, right? So just copy that same disabled down here. We'll save that. Come over here, and now you can see make and model. We can't click on those. They're grayed out. They are disabled. As soon as we click a year, make and model activate. If we go back to year, back to this top value, right, there is what's important. By having the option value empty string for year, if we reset this, right, 1948, these are available, year selected down here in our React tools, 1948. We click on year, it gets set back to an empty string. That evaluates as a falsy value, right? That's what this does. The not, so that's disabled when there is not a state year selected. So an empty string evaluates as false. The exclamation point in front negates that, so that turns it into a true statement. So disabled is true when there is not a year selected. So that's how we read that. So we get year options. We click on a year. It activates our next two selects. That's a good place right here. We can just jump in to terminal, and we'll just open a new terminal. That's a good place. Get status here. Git commit -am. Let's commit our work. So we have added select year. And so we'll go ahead and push that. And that way we are committing early and often, tracking our changes. We don't lose our work. Should something happen, it's pushed up into GitHub. So now we're going to have something to get our make options. So we can just start stubbing the rest of these in. So get year options, get make options. Finally, there is a get model options. So get model options. Up here, we're going to just copy this 2 more times. Get year options. We change the name of this to get make options. And this gets changed to get model options. And so here, let's just return an empty array and make, for a second, we'll return an empty array. So let's save that, switch back to our other terminal that's running. We'll go over here and make sure our application's not broken. It's still functioning as intended, so we're still checking that functionality. That looks good. So now we need to keep track. We've selected a year. We need to keep track of which make we've selected, which model we've selected. So let's stub those in. Year selected gets duplicated twice. So there will be the make we selected as well as the model that we selected. So year selected, make selected, model selected. The same way we handle these changes, right? We'll have to handle a change here when you choose a make. So we'll just drop down and paste that in. And so I'll put these, we'll just clean this up a little bit. We'll line those up. So select, disabled, and then on change. And so it's not handle year select. This is going to be handle make select. And then we're going to do the same thing here. We'll clean this up a little bit. And then this will be handle model select. So we can save that. We go back to, sorry, I went past it. Handle year select. Let's copy and paste that twice. This is going to handle make select. And this will set the state for the make selected. And it'll still be the event target value. Then we are going to handle the model select. And this will set state model selected, event target value. So we'll save that. So now we have all this event handling wired up. So when we make changes, it should update our state. And we need to somehow populate the options. So let's dig into that. So I'm going to scroll back up in the code here. get make options. How do we figure out what the options are for that make dropdown? The first thing we have to do is we have to look and say, if this dot state dot year selected. We can't do anything if we don't know that the year was selected. So if the year was selected, we can do something. If not, just return this empty array. However, if it was selected, then we can say this dot state dot year make model, right? And then we're going to use the square brackets here. And we're going to use for the key this dot state dot year selected. So this dot state year make model, using the key this dot state year selected. Save. What's it complaining about? Let's see. Expect an assignment or function call, saw an expression. This dot state year make model. That's fine. We just have to put this in a variable. So we will say, basically, if you think about what this is pulling back, year make model is our full data set. So now we are only going to get the data that's under the year that we've selected. So we'll just say let year data equal. And now we have access to the year data. And then we got to turn these into options. It's the same pattern that we did here. So we can copy this line, right? And the options are going to be the keys, only this time it's not the entire year make model. It's just this year data that we've pulled out. So we paste that inside the parentheses, and then this part stays. We don't have to adjust anything here. We're still mapping over the keys, and we're still setting the key equal to the key that we're mapping over, the value to the key, and finally the value here in the option box as the key. So we can come over here. We can check that our code works. So we will say 1909. My options for make now are forward. And then, of course, we've not done anything with model yet. So to see if this is working, if I switch this back to year, we see make disables. If I switch this to 1909, we see forward. If I switch this to 1957, we have more options. All right, so we're just going back and forth. We're watching our state update over here. So we can do 1960, make, Chevrolet. And so now we can see year selected update, make selected update, 1960. So we're going to repeat the same thing for model options. So we're just copy this. We actually just want the inside. Copy the inside of this function. And we're going to paste it inside model options. Let's pull this down so we have a little more room. See all of our code. So get model options. Now we don't care if the state has a year selected. We care that the state has a make selected. So if this dot state dot make selected, we use the make that we've selected as the key for year make model, right? But we're missing a piece. You can't just jump in there. We're still going to have to pull out this data. So we can do that here. So actually, let's back up because this is great. That's a great way to reuse our data. So I apologize. Let's just paste this back in. All I'm doing is copy and pasting. Let's keep this variable called year data because we still need this. But we just want to add one thing. We can't operate on the get model options unless we have both. So if this dot state dot make selected as well as, so we say double and this dot state of year selected. So in order for us to get the model options, we have to know what make they picked, and we have to know what year the users picked. So we can leave this constant year data there. That's correct. Let's just paste it down. We'll duplicate it. And so now instead of year data, this is going to be our make data. And we are going to look inside the year data that we've already fetched for this dot state, not year selected, but make selected. And so we will save that. And so we will set the same set of options go in here. Let's see, we are looping over make data. There's where the linter helps us. So we're doing the keys of the make data, not the year data. So I've saved that file. We go back into React. And so we'll say 1958, model activated. So we're going to have to fix that. Chevrolet. And then we can see the options. There's a Corvette, and we can switch to BMW. And there's a 600, And we can go to 2005, and I like use Toyota, and then we can see all of the Toyota options. But again, we have already seen a bug. So if I roll back up to year, this resets correctly. If I go 1959, it gets mad. So we are not taking care to ensure that we are resetting the state. And so it's okay if you didn't catch what happened or why this broke, but we jumped way back, and then the state got out of sync. And so we can look in the console and see what's going on. So function.keys can't convert undefined or null to object. So part of our state is rolling back, part of our state's hanging around. And so let's deal with this project. Let's sort through what's going on. So we kind of think through it in our heads and figure out where we can fix things. The first thing that we've noticed is that just by having the year selected, it is activating the model section, and get model options will be populated in there. For this to be disabled, so remember we're negating this, so we're saying it's disabled if this doesn't exist. So if this doesn't exist, right, if there is no year selected, and there is no make selected, then the model is disabled. So that's what we're saying here. Disabled equals not this dot state dot year selected and not this dot state dot make selected. So if both of those are not selected, then we will not see it activate. So we'll go back to our React app. We see it loads. We can select 1958. Oh, I wrote that the wrong way. Make and model. So let's look at that again. This dot state dot year selected and not this dot state dot make selected. Year and make. Let's try just switching this to an or, because I may have my Boolean logic wrong there. If either of those are not selected, so let's see, year, make, and then there we can see model. And so it wasn't an and, it's an or. So now let's go down here and switch the year again. All right, and so we switch the year, and then our code is executing, line 41, and it's blowing up on this make data. So let's go look at line 41. So we're inside this get model options. If this dot state dot make selected and this dot state dot year selected. So we want to catch when they've rolled something up. What ends up happening, I've switched the year, but we didn't reset the fact that the year changed. We didn't reset the model options. And so this is running, and it's trying to pull out models that don't exist for a year, essentially is what part of what's going on there. And so we're going to go to our event handler. So when the year is selected, let's set the state to the year selected. So that's good. Let's blank out model selected. We're going to reset that to an empty string, right? Make selected is going to get reset to an empty string. So those both look good. If they change the make, we want to make sure that we reset the model. Let's try that and see if that fixes our error. So we go 1956, Chevrolet, Corvette. We go to the React developer tools. We can see all the selections here. However, if I go here and change the year to 1964, make selected, model selected, both blank out. Here, that didn't flow downhill. That didn't reset. Or I guess the Chevrolet reset and then model did. Let's refresh the page. So I didn't mean to confuse you. I picked 1962. I picked Pontiac. Now I'm going to choose 1909, where Pontiac definitely does not exist. Note that our make selection reset. If I go to 1960, make Chevrolet, or if I go to 1959, make Chevrolet, that is still sticking around. So if I go to 1909, then it changes to Ford. So once again, 1961, make Chevrolet. 1960, make selected, has blanked out. Chevrolet is sticking around. So let's reset that list, those options. So model selected gets reset. On make select, year select, we blank out model selected and make selected. And so our options, we get the year options, get the make options. Let's go to get make options. If this dot state dot year selected, then we run through those. This key here is being set to the key from the data. That is why we are seeing that option stick around. So if we were to make this more unique, so under the hood React's keeping track of these options, and so it's seeing that Chevrolet exists in multiple places. Even though our app isn't breaking, from the user experience, it might be a good idea to reset that. So we're just going to make a different key right here. So we're going to take, as we're mapping over these values, we have the year data. We know what year they selected. I'm just going to shorten this, I'm going to cut this out and we'll just say year, right? We'll make a new variable, const year equals this.state.year selected. And so down here, our key can just be the model K plus year. So we'll put both of those strings together. Now when we go to 1960 and we choose Chevrolet, or if we switch back to 1959, it resets because the key here in React for Chevrolet for the selection, so if we go in here, the years stay the same. Let's go here. Notice the key here is an Austin 1959, a BMW 1959, a Chevrolet 1959. So we want to do the same thing for model. We want to make model unique. We don't just want 1959 Chevrolet Corvette, where when we switch to 1960, it would still say Chevrolet Corvette. We just want to update the key there as well. So we'll say const year, and we'll drop this in. So now instead of year selected, this can just be year. And we'll do the same thing for make. So this will be const make equals this.state.make selected. And now the key is going to be the key plus the make plus the year. And so React will reload here, and we can do a 1954 Chevrolet Corvette. And if we look at this data, we open app, we go to our second select, or all the way down here, the key is Corvette Chevrolet 1954. Now, if you remember our data set, if we go in and look at the state, so let's just click on the app object at the top and look at year, make, model, 1909 Ford Model T has an identifier right here. So we can use that ID as well. Instead of concatenating these strings, we have the ability to go get that key out of that data. So the make data here, the key becomes make data K for the ID. And so now if we do 1950 Hillman Minx Magnificent, and we go in here and we look at that last select box, the key is 4. Notice the value here, Minx Magnificent, matches the name. If we were looking up this data in a database, we don't want the name. We want that same identifier. We want that unique integer identifier. So we plug that in for the value and save that. And so now year, make, Hillman, model, Minx Magnificent. We can jump down here. And you can see the key is 4, the value is 4, and we have Minx Magnificent. So we're going to add one last thing to our application here. After you've made your selections, let's just drop a new div in here. We will tell the user you selected. And so we'll do some stuff with state. So we'll say this.state.year selected. And we will toss in the make selected. And finally, the model selected that has the ID This will stay to model selected. So there's a few things we're going to have to change, but let's plug this in. This will change. So you selected 1948. Why is it not putting the spaces after that? Let's do and non-breaking space. Save that. Jump back over to our React app. You selected 1954 Chevrolet Corvette. Nope. It says you selected 1954 Chevrolet 6. That has the ID 6. So now the last piece that we want to keep track of, we do want to keep this name around somewhere. So let's alter our state one last time. So we don't want to change the model selected. The model selected is still the ID. Let's just add a model name as a string. And now when we get our model options, once they are all selected, we have, let's see, what do we want to plug this in? Handle, model selected, event.target.value. And so right here, we want to change this. And we're going from model selected over to, grab the same one, model name, just copy and paste that. So when we handle the model select, we are setting the model selected. The value is an ID, the model name to event.target. And so target has a few options. We should be able to do inner HTML and read out the inner HTML there so that we can say, oh, Fleetwood, what do we miss? I didn't change the output down here. This .state model name 1926 Chrysler Imperial. Notice when we do inner HTML, we get this option comes in here, option model, option value to Imperial. So we need a way to get Imperial out of that HTML.